I have something related to the deep sea that I personally witnessed myself, which I guess would fit this thread. I'm not sure if I should really be telling it here, but I figure that not many people will see this story, so why not? I may as well. It's not exactly a fisherman sees weird light on a lake kind of story though. It's a lot crazier than that, so I imagine it will not be taken all that well. I will try and skip over all of the boring bureaucratic and technical details to not make this longer than it already will be. Basically, I was part of a deep sea recovery team a few years back now. I won't be explaining why or how I ended up on the team, other than that I work for a very well-known company. People have no idea that this company still operates in deep sea exploration, which for them is pretty beneficial and allows for less scrutiny. We were brought in due to the nature of the event and wanting to keep things under wraps as much as possible. You see, a private vessel capable of deep sea traversal actually went missing in the ocean just off the coast of a private island somewhere in the Caribbean. This was owned by a very rich set of people, and for whatever reason, unbeknownst to us, they decided that they wanted to explore a section of the deep sea. As far as I'm aware, they hired some experts privately to be on their payroll, and so this was a major red flag. These people were rich, mega rich, maybe not uber celebrities that everyone would know, but rich enough that it would cause a massive stir in the upper echelons of society. I think that to this day, there is no public knowledge or record of their deaths or this incident. I was part of a three-man crew sent down there in a DSV. That's a deep submergence vehicle, for those unaware, in order to scour the depths for any trace of them. We were instructed to monitor for any kind of anomalies or instrument interference that could have possibly caused them to become lost. There was no hope of them being alive. Too much time had passed by for that to really be a possibility. The working theory was that there was a system failure that prevented them from ascending, and so the people on board simply suffocated once the oxygen depleted. I will skip over most of the descent and checks because it's just boring and doesn't really tell you all that much. We have tons of safety checks before we even step on board, different processes that we have to work down like a checklist at our stops, etc. I will say that it took many hours to descend to their last known vicinity, and even longer still to locate the missing sub. That's not even to mention the amount of hours of preparation before we even got in there. I was amazed that we even found the thing. We did not really have a lot of information to go on, and the sea is vast, but we did find it, or rather, we found what was left of it. It took a while to be able to even see most of it out of the front viewport. Even with the 20,000 lumen LED panels on the submersible, visibility is insanely low, and there are always dust clouds being kicked up, but we saw the vessel clear as day. It was ripped into pieces, likely from the pressure. I figure they must have had some kind of a breach or another failure. It was not a pretty sight. I don't have any pictures personally, but if you've ever heard of the Byford dolphin incident, the sight in front of us was much like that, minus the oil rig aspect. The entire thing is just crumpled inward as a result of the massive implosion of force. It was embedded into the seafloor and half covered in silt. All of the metal is just bent at horrible angles and torn like paper. It looked almost as if a gigantic invisible fist just took one good swing at this thing and then started tearing. The breach looked to have come from the starboard side. It's not a clean hole like you would typically expect. It just looks like something punched inward with a massive force and took all of the metal with it, contorting the metal until it snaps and releases. The viewport was gone entirely from its normal place. It was peeled back into the interior. It looked like a gaping wound, and you could see the jagged bits of metal all curled up. I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that when something like that happens, it's so fast that you can't even comprehend it. You hear a bang that is deafening, and all of a sudden, you hear nothing. You feel it more than you hear it. You feel the vibration all throughout your body, all at once. Everything implodes and goes inward. There's a creak. Everything suddenly just becomes dark in your vision, and boom. Your body follows the same pattern as the metal exterior. It gets ripped into chunks and folds inward, and this all happens in a matter of seconds. It was a horrible sight. You could not even distinguish the bits of people from the scattered buoyant materials and the bits of the DSV that had been ripped apart, because they were just so unrecognizable. It's not like finding human remains, it's truly like finding something other. It was so much to process, seeing this, scanning for any kind of reason for the implosion, and then noticing something there that shouldn't have been there. At first, I thought it was just some kind of a shadow, because of the scattered debris being caused by the lights. It was this hunched over shadow that was just an abstract shape. My mind couldn't really piece together what the shape was. It was down on the ground near the wreckage, but once we got closer to it, it started to move, and I realized it was not just a shadow, because it turned around and it stood upwards. And the silhouette that I could see before me, it looked vaguely human. I wish I was making this up. It was entirely black. It looked almost as if it was a person, wearing some kind of an atmospheric diving suit, but all black, and clearly not human, because a suit like that would not have been able to withstand these depths. It wasn't quite as bulky as one of those suits, but its head, it was shaped almost like the helmet/visor thing would be. It was quite thick and stretched out from its face. Other than that, it was quite human in shape, and I noticed that its face was moving. It seemed to be moving its mouth in a chewing motion, if I had to guess. That's what the movements looked like. And in its hands, I noticed that it was holding something. It was holding a chunk of something. I could not see clearly enough to be sure of what it was, but it made my heart sink. The thing, it almost looks like it's looking at us, but I could not make out its features enough to know for sure. It didn't have any kind of visible eyes that I could see. We were all in disbelief, trying to send a message back using the through water comms, trying to figure out what we should do. And then this thing takes a step forward, a clear step, a human step. And all of a sudden, we're receiving acoustic communication. It's patchy, but you can make out bits, and it sounds exactly as if it were being received from another DSV. It's something like, "Help us," and then there's this static and low frequency hum, something on the sea floor. And then there's this garbled burst of static, and I can barely hear what they say. They're saying something, but all I can hear is the buzzing. And then I hear, "Not human." And then there's a long pause, a really long pause. And then it says, "It's following." And from there, it just stops, and that message just repeats. It did not take a genius to realize that it was someone from the wreckage talking before their vessel suffered a breach. It didn't stop. It kept playing on repeat. This is when we decided that we needed to go. But of course, it's not that simple. We couldn't just race to the surface. It would be all too easy to suffer a loss of control during the ascent and start tumbling or pitching. Or we could easily wind up with mechanical strain on the vessel, which could cause massive problems. Either way, we were making preparations to leave. I remember, and I don't know if this is my brain failing me, because it felt so dreamlike when I saw it, but I remember seeing a fish swim by this thing, much closer than we were, not far away from this thing at all. It was a tripod fish, I think. It's hard to miss because of how long it is vertically. They literally look like they are walking on the seafloor, hence the name. Look it up if you've never heard of it. They're not exactly small. They usually sit and wait for prey and then move in small bursts. And this one got too close to this thing, and I just remember it disappearing from my view. Like, I saw a brief glimpse of it close to this creature, and then all of a sudden, I saw this fish just inflate. It's the only word that I can think of, and all of a sudden, it was just gone. I could not even see a trace of it. By this point, we were fleeing. but this thing kept walking closer and closer. It never ran though, it only walked. I remember at one point, it got within a certain distance of us, and it put its hand out. It put its hand out stretched in our direction, with its palm flat. I remember hearing that horrid creaking noise, the creaking of metal, and I braced myself. I thought I was going to die that day. That thankfully did not happen. We managed to retreat some distance away, and then we began our ascent very rapidly. We ignored a lot of protocols, and I must say, we were incredibly lucky to come out of it with little to no consequences. The thing never followed us. It seemed happy to just return to that wreckage. We saw it face us, if you can call it that, for a little while longer. I remember it tilting its head upwards ever so slightly as we ascended, and then I saw it walking back to where it came from as it was disappearing from my vision. I was shaking and sweating. It took everything in me not to vomit in that DSV. The fallout when we got back to the surface was massive. All of us were in pieces, and in the end, I was the only one fit to formulate all of my thoughts into words. Imagine that entire operation, that entire explanation hinging on you not sounding crazy. I tried to describe everything that we saw and experienced as scientifically as possible, and, well, I didn't get thrown into the madhouse at the very least. The family of these people were furious. My company shut down our operation on the spot and urged these people not to pursue it further. I think they wanted to kill me for failing, as they put it. Luckily, my company is not run by a bunch of idiots, but you know what they say, money talks. We were forced into NDAs and removed from the operation. At one point, I ended up in a room with the father of one of the people, I think, and damn, he made it seem like he could have killed me right then and there. Maybe the emotion of the situation just made it feel like that to me, but I've never felt so intimidated by so few words. I guess sharing it here isn't really the best idea, huh? I worked at that company for another good few years with no issues at all. I retired after that, as my bones were getting a little too old for that kind of work. I never did find out if anything was recovered after that. I never saw any reports. I never saw anything in the newspaper or in the news. I still think that to this day, most people have no idea about this incident. Call me crazy if you want, but there are things on this planet, underneath our oceans, that would make even the biggest alien deniers lose their minds. The aliens are not what you need to be worrying about. It's what is already here, down in our oceans. I'm not sure if this story counts, considering I never met the guy, but this happened to me when I was around 16 years old. My dad wants to spend Christmas with his girlfriend. We get into a big fight over it at a family dinner one night. My uncle offers to let me stay with him over the break. My dad agrees. My uncle picks me up the next weekend. He lives in a nice house up in the mountains. He has a good amount of land, but not nearly as much as his neighbors. But it's also a 3-hour car ride. I decide to sneak off somewhere to get high. I tell my uncle I want to just go for a walk. He tells me it's fine, just to make sure to stay on his side of the property line. Apparently, his neighbor had shot some hunter chasing a wounded deer onto his property earlier that year. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I look around for somewhere not visible from the house. It's pretty difficult, because the house has huge windows everywhere. I spot an old shed on neighbor's side of the property line. I go to check it out. The door has a padlock. Damn. But he left the key inside. Sweet. I unlock the shed. I open up the door. The smell hits me like a damn freight train. It smells awful. It smells like a dead raccoon, but like 100 times worse. I dart away from the shed and nearly vomit. I'm like, what the fuck? Is this dude a serial killer? I work up the courage to go back over to the shed. I turn on my phone flashlight and shine it inside. Jesus Christ. There are decapitated small animal carcasses everywhere. There are a shitload piled up against the wall. There are a few rabbits and what I think used to be a coyote nailed to the wall. The walls and the floors are all caked in dried blood. I get the hell out of there. I was not staying there for any longer. I ended up just walking down the street for 20 minutes to get high behind a 7-Eleven. I went back a couple of years later and heard some rumor about the guy shooting himself. Honestly, I'm just glad he did not catch me snooping around. I am responsible for the deaths of several people. Around 4 years ago, I was a vendor on the darknet. It was a relatively short-lived thing. I was just doing it because I was too lazy to get a job, and at the time, I didn't want to settle for the 9-to-5 thing. I wanted to start my own business and use the drug money as a startup. I had been using myself for years. Along with that, I met loads of people in the dealing scene and eventually started dealing myself. I have a lot of anxiety though, so I hated meeting up with people in parking lots, and I definitely did not want anyone to know where I lived. That's when I read about the Silk Road and Ross Ulbricht being caught. I got obsessed with the idea of it. I got obsessed with learning OPSEC, all with the goal of eventually using my connections to start up my store. Well, after a couple of months I did. I started my store with free drugs, ketamine, meth, and some outdoor weed my buddy was getting for super cheap. All was going good for a good few months. I had a couple of thousand get stolen in an exit scam, but I had about $25,000 saved at that point, so it didn't ruin my life like a few vendors I knew of. Eventually, I met a local connect that came into the town only once a week, but had fucking anything that I wanted. Mescaline, LSD, mushrooms, PCP even, and fentanyl. At the time, people weren't really cutting heroin with fentanyl. I mean, I'm sure that plenty of people did, but it was not nearly as commonplace as now. People just did fentanyl, and still do. I put all of my addresses into an Excel spreadsheet along with their name, zip code, order, along with the amount. At the time, I was selling some super white powdered mescaline. The fentanyl was also a white powder, very similar consistency. Long story short, my Excel screwed up, or I screwed up, and about 7 people's mescaline orders were filled in as fentanyl orders. They all went out. I did not notice and kept doing my thing for a few days. After about 5 days, someone contacted me and told me that their friend died from my mescaline. I immediately called bullshit and went to check my order log and scale up how much I had of my mescaline left. Well, I had about 11 grams more than I should have. I still don't know how the hell that could have happened. I wasn't a user, but I was definitely high off dabs. I went to check my order log on the market to see if anyone had finalized on their purchase, and a couple of them were, but none from a specific day, including the person that messaged me. No one that had purchased mescaline that day had finalized their orders. The market I was on also had a feature to see the user's last activity, and none of them had logged in at least 3 days, most of them 2 days. I immediately deactivated my vendor account. I didn't even need confirmation. I knew what happened. I knew that I just killed several people. I sold the rest of my drugs, converted my Bitcoin to cash, and moved the fuck away. I did not speak to anyone for weeks. I found a job in a restaurant, living in a city I always wanted to. I have not touched drugs since that day. I have not had anything to do with that life since then. I still think about them every single night. I saved their names and I googled them a couple of days later. I was able to find information on 4 customers that definitely died. 1 customer shared it with a friend. They both died. I don't know why I'm even posting this, mainly because I have no one to tell. And even if I did, I don't think I could. I spend my days sober, clocking into work, clocking out of work, coming home, playing video games. I'm a complete recluse. People I used to know have distanced themselves immensely, and I know it's because I'm a shell of my former self. I can't help it. Could I even tell a therapist about this? I don't feel like I deserve to be alive. Am I really living anyway? I don't even know anymore. Maybe this will help me feel better. So, I thought X would like this story, because at this point, I've mostly gotten over it. This takes place when I was a kid in the mid-1990s, with my parents overseas in Spain in for a vacation. It was called Matilda Ride. We were between a major city and a smaller, yet still kind of big town in central Spain. The town was basically an oldish mining town that was still somewhat going strong, but was slowly falling off of the map. We decided to stop off in the town, as it has a few more American things that we recognize. And as little kids, me and my sister did not want to eat the good-ass food over there, and instead, we just want chicken fingers. In the town, we look around for a bit, and I spot a Thomas the Train looking thing in the side of a large mountainish hill with kids lined up outside of it. I begged my parents to go, so they decided to split up, my mother taking me and my dad taking my sister. It was called Matilda Ride. It really was something like Matilda's Riders or something like that, but really horribly translated into English. It was a small, poorly made version of James, sort of like in the picture I posted with this, but was slightly faded red, so it looked pink. The train was on the tracks of an old minecart system that was barely big enough to fit the engine and all of the cars onto it, often making me get scared that the side of the engine would crash into the walls of the mine. It didn't, however, but it was obvious the kids were all on edge when we entered the ride. The cart was way too small for an adult to sit in, so many of the parents stood on the outside for the engine to get going. It had a voice box in each cart, saying things in Spanish, then in English, things like, "Matilda go through the magical tunnel to find her friends," and "Beware, danger is around the corner," but all in a slightly garbled manner because of the voice box's age. The first thing that we saw over than the walls of the cave were a few scenes of a magical mine, where there were poorly made minecarts on a small miniature set that aimed to make it look like the cave was far bigger than it was, to little effect. So far, it seemed like a poorly put together ride from a shithole area of the country. As we began getting further into the ride, it was turning out to be some fun, at least until we got to a certain point where the room was more lit up. At that moment, I can see the cart behind me, which was the second one before the caboose. It was noticeably more worn, more freshly worn than old, as many of the other carts were fine, aside from a scratch or two. This caboose cart had some stains on it towards the side, but the kids did not seem to mind at all. They had some of that shit on them too. My first thought was that this guy brought some fucking pudding onto the train, and as a narc, I began saying that he had food on the train to the conductor of the ride, that he broke the rules and he had food. The conductor jokingly calls to the kid, asking if he had some food, and the kid did not respond. You can see where this is going. The conductor repeats himself 3 times before getting a little bit panicked, so he stopped the train at the actual next stop, which was 3 seconds away, and checks on the kid in full view of the other kids. The kid was quickly taken away after a small radio talk in Spanish before the Spanish kid screamed, resulting in some commotion and a couple of the other guys coming in and removing the kid, and all of the usual stuff you would do in this kind of an emergency. The train car was detached, and the conductor began again like nothing happened. I know I'm jumping straight into the action here with a thing like this, but that is just how fast I remember this happening. Me making a fuss about the kid having food, the conductor realizing the kid was actually dead, and then moving on after a minute or two of messing around from them. After that incident, most of us were full on crying. Some kids vomited from crying so much, and others were having a hard time breathing from all of the wheezing that they were doing. The conductor of the train quickly tries to calm us down by moving on to the next segment, rather than just getting us all out of there ASAP. But once he realizes that it won't work, he just skips the remaining 2 areas and leads us outside. The conductor, 2 workers, and a few others usher the mother of the child inside a little office in one of the tunnels. As far off in the distance, ambulance sirens can be heard. My mom takes me out of there as fast as she can to the area that she said she'd meet my father back up at. After about 15 minutes of waiting, they return, and we leave after my dad gets me chicken tenders. I'm not even trying to joke here. That's literally what he did to try and calm me down. As we are getting out of the car to go back to our hotel, I looked over to see the ambulance bringing the kid in, and I noticed him coughing harshly, so he was still alive. The blood seemed to be coming from his arm, so it's safe to assume that he lived from all of this, rather than dying right there in the train car. He must have passed out instead and been mistaken as dead. I've tried my absolute hardest to look this shit up so bad, but every mention of Matilda Ride I get is either some random shit about the movie Matilda or a ride from Disney or something. I'm certain it closed down because otherwise it probably would have been featured on some clickbait article by now. Drums in the woods. So I have a story for you that maybe you might be able to explain for me. This happened to me in 2018. I get diagnosed with diabetes at age 30 because I'm fat. I start eating healthy and I go hiking. In 2019, I lost some weight. My wife supports me. Hiking is our new hobby. We invite some friends often to hike as a new activity. We show them all of the good spots that we discovered. This one time in November, we drink the night before, and it gets much later into the night than we initially planned. Good times are had all around. The next day we are kinda hungover, so we sleep in and start hiking way too late. It's already getting dark on the way there. No problem though, we've been there once before, I will find the way. We wanted to hike in this ravine. It's pretty cool. It has a waterfall which is awesome, but the stone path is slippery, mossy, and wet. It's kinda remote and unknown too, so all around it's just untouched nature, but we definitely need the flashlights. This is not a skinwalker story. The things that happened are not even that exciting, but it was really kind of unnerving at the time. So we walk through the forest that leads to the ravine, when a fog raises up and makes it really hard to see, kind of just out of nowhere really. I'm not spooked yet, it's just this really dense fog. When we go inside the ravine, we admire the natural formations of the rock. There are lots of mushrooms and in general, we are just liking the nature. The fog makes it nicer for the pictures too. Then friend A asks me if we heard that. We all give each other confused glances. I say no one heard anything. He shrugs it off, probably just some animal. Some time passes by, and we make good time getting down to the deepest point. Then friend B thought it would be funny to start climbing into one of the small caves, where some kind of wooden box was laying, joking that it might be a drug stash. While climbing, the idiot drops his phone, so now he really has to get down there to get it. We wait around for him to make his way into the narrow cave, kinda worried that he might get stuck. The box, surprise surprise, was not a drug stash, just an empty rotten box. He fiddles around for a while in piles of dried leaves. Finally, he finds his phone. He suddenly says, "What are those drums?" None of us up here can hear any drums at all. I make a joke about how the goblins will now come and eat him. I keep making jokes and laughing, and he gets stern and insists, "No, Anon, I'm serious. I am hearing drums." Friend A now chimes in and confirms that he believes that what he heard earlier sounded like drums too. Friend B is still calm and just confused and makes his way back up, pressing his back into the rock to get out. For the last few meters, we pull him up. We all agree that was a stupid thing to do. "You still hearing drums?" I ask him. "Faint," he replies. Eyebrows are raised. "Like, down there?" "No, I think it's coming from over there." He points in the direction that we are heading anyways. At this point, I'm thinking that A and B are just making this shit up because it's dark and spooky. My wife is getting nervous by all of this talk. She does not like spooky things at all. She wants us to stop talking about it completely. We continue on our way. 15 or so minutes later, I get goosebumps. Now I can hear the drums. They sound like they are some way ahead. They are clear as day, but they don't sound like any drum I have ever heard before. It's hard to describe. The sound kinda changes pitch. Now I ask if others can hear the drums too. I get some empty looks coming from them. My wife gets really pissed. I tell her not to worry. It's probably some hippies smoking in a circle. I don't really believe that myself. It's November and freezing. She does not buy either. We continue on walking. We still have like an hour of walking ahead before reaching the halfway point. Finally, all of us are hearing the drums now, including my wife, who does not find this trip enjoyable at all now. The drums are getting louder. They sound like they are around the corner, and then they stop. Friend A suddenly goes off the path, going to the spot where the drums seem to come from last. He suddenly exclaims, "What the fuck?" We go after him and find a rock. There's no one around, it's just a rock. We all make confused faces. The distance is kinda correct to where we heard the drums from too. The rock is smeared with this yellow powder. Then we look closer and see what friend A is on about. It has been carved with all kinds of stuff. I have no idea what this means. The picture on screen now is the rock. The rock has a crevice that seems to go a good way down. Friend A thinks that the yellow stuff is sulfur. Cliché much. We take pictures and go back to the trail. We make the rest of the journey without really talking. We are all kinda nervous. We get back to the car without any trouble. No further events happen whatsoever. My wife is very happy once sitting in the car. We Google the words as soon as we are home. We get no results. Today, my wife actually reminded me. She was like, "Remember those drums? Wasn't that so creepy?" I remembered those events and I decided to post the story here and see if you have any ideas what it was.